thank you so much for everybody who has joined in. Today, we are going to be talking about from raw data to AI ready insights. And that's something that, we have had a recurrent ask about. And the agenda for today would be how do you want to build your life pipelines in minutes? And for this, we have Dan with us. He's the director of sales engineering at Hevo. Dan would love to, hear a quick intro from your side as well.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So Dan Murphy, Director of Sales Engineering here at Hevo. Nice to meet everyone. Been in the data industry for about 20 years. Started off kind of in the consulting area and then moved over to BI and then moved over to data warehousing. So the last one to pick was ETL. So that's how I ended up here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here today. I feel like today we'll have a very quick but very fruitful workshop from our end about getting the pipelines live. Just to give you a quick brief line items to make sure we will take question and answers throughout this session, but we'll take it towards the end. So there's a chat, there's a Q&A tab which is there in your webinar chat box. So just make sure you put all your questions there, and we'll take it towards the end. Then just let's just move on to the agenda part, right? For today. Cool. So today we'll cover the gap, which is basically why your AI projects are stalling, what AI ready actually looks like, a live demo, what makes it work in production, and then we'll also talk about like a real life case study which we have seen in our customer itself, and then towards the end we'll take all the Q&As together. So Dan, I think I have the first question for you. We hear a lot about how AI projects fail, are stalling and failing, right? But the narrative usually ends up blaming the model or the team. From a data infrastructure standpoint, where does the failure actually starts happening?
Sure. Let's go ahead and start with that idea. So everyone likes to point fingers when things don't work or things take too long to be adopted. But if we look at AI and we look at what usually stagnates that adoption, typically the areas that we see are fragmentation, fragility, and latency, right? So the fragmentation being it's hard to get all the data to one place. We have to make sure that the AI models have all of the context that they need and can give the best answers that they can. So we need to bring in all those different tools. They could be SaaS tools, they could be maybe even lists from other systems that I bought or other databases in my pipeline. The other thing is fragility. So pipelines break. It's just kind of a rule of thumb of how ETL works, right? So it's just the goal is that hopefully they break less. And when they do break, you can find out that they are broken and go ahead and fix them. And then of course, latency is the other problem that keeps AI adoption low, is sometimes it takes a while for that data to get there. So everyone expects that the data is relevant and the data is up to date in an AI tool. So we want to make sure that we can do that and we can get that going. So that really leads to all the fact that usually AI teams have problems actually just building the plumbing more than actually building the model, right? The models are pretty good these days. The way that agentic AI can pick things up. We have partners like Snowflake and things like that that have semantic views that make it relatively easy to bring in that structured data so that you can do that. The hardest part is really getting the data there and really getting the ETL figured out so that everything can be loaded as needed. So when we talk about AI ready, what are we talking about? Like, what does that look like? So some of the key things when we talk about ready, AI ready data is that data is near real time, right? So with other tools and other systems, we were able to get away with like, maybe daily syncs or something like that. Really with AI, people are expecting it to be up to date. We also need to make sure that our pipelines feeding the AI tool are reliable and observable, right? I need to know that those pipelines are going to work. And if they don't work, I need to be notified that something has failed. Centralization. So we need to make sure we bring everything to a single location so that that AI model can run correctly. And then, of course, scalable, right? So as time goes on, sources are going to increase, right? And this just isn't respective to just AI related things. This is pretty much everything in data, right? Everything in data, as time goes on, sources are going to grow, the size of those sources are going to grow, and hopefully your customer base will grow, which means that the data coming from those sources will grow as well. When we talk about AI versus BI ready, so a lot of customers think that these are very similar, and there's actually quite a bit of different between the two of them, right? So if we take a look at BI ready and we look at the freshness, as I mentioned before, usually we're used to a daily or maybe even an hourly refresh. With AI, people are really expecting it to be much more near real time. So multiple times throughout the day, if not multiple times throughout the hour. Schema flexibility with BI, it's very rigid, right? Columns, tables, and rows. We know exactly what those formats are going to look like. It has to fit in those specified formats because our BI tools are set to look at a table in a certain format and to read it a certain way. Whereas AI, it's dynamic. It can read just about anything that comes in. I just have to make sure that as things change, it doesn't break. Volume tolerances with BI, it's relatively predictable on my volume. So I have a pretty good idea of when things are going to come in, how they're going to come in, what they're going to look like. It's pretty easy to model. With AI, because I have all these different sources and all these different locations coming from, it's going to actually be a much higher volume, and it's going to vary over time a lot more. And we get into failure tolerances. So BI, if something fails in BI, that's okay because it'll go ahead and tell us, it'll let us know. Chances are the report will have a date on it and the date will be out of date. Chances are the report may not even run if it was a full failure pipeline. With AI could still work if things failed because of the way that AI is going to crawl the data. It doesn't necessarily easily tell your end users that, hey, this data is from yesterday, or hey, this data is a little bit dated. So really silent failures are not acceptable with an AI model.
Interesting enough, Dan. As you sort of explained, right? Same warehouses that used to work for dashboards might not cut it for your AI workloads. So, when it comes to production, what are the specific failure modes that teams run into when they're actually, trying to bridge the gap between being AI ready?
Yeah, if we look at where failure modes happen and where failure happens for ETL, it happens kind of in these main areas, right? So schema drift probably being the number one, right? So because we're connecting to these SaaS data sources, those data sources are managed by somebody else. They're managed by another system. I don't always know when that system's going to change. Ideally, they have release notes and they let me know, and schemas don't change that much, but we all know that we've missed our release notes a couple times, and sometimes that schema will evolve. The nice thing is with Hevo, we'll go ahead and we'll deal with that automatic schema change. We'll notice that the data types might have changed. We notice that there might be additional columns or additional tables that are available, and we'll go ahead and we'll make them available in the destination as we see them change in the source. So that way we don't break the pipeline. A lot of our competitors will just break because the pipeline will be like, I see something different. I don't know what to do. I give up and it just fails. And we can't really have that failure these days anymore with ETL pipelines. Another area that we see because we are connecting to these SaaS sources and these web-based sources is we run into API rate limits. So a lot of these APIs will limit how often you can talk to them, how much data you can pull back, and all of those things. You need a system that can understand those responses and then go ahead and retry and back off based on what they're getting back from those API calls. And Hevo does that. As our pipelines are running, if we get a message that we've exceeded a rate limit, we'll go ahead and we'll wait a little bit longer and then we'll go ahead and retry that pipeline. Pipeline hasn't broken, it's just the API is not willing to give me data yet. Duplicate records, if we start to see duplicate records, if everything in that row matches the previous row, we'll go ahead and we'll start doing some dedupe on our ingestion so that you do not have duplication. And then late arriving events, because data is typically trickling into those source systems, we want to make sure that everything is correct, all the timings are correct. So we add additional columns to bring in watermarking so that we know when those columns came in. So there might be a column that came in or a row that came in late that wasn't there for the first sync, but it actually happened before that first sync did. We'll go ahead and make sure that that information is captured and brought in through the pipeline. So where does Hevo fit in all of this, right? And where do we fit inside of that stack? So at the very bottom there, you see you have your sources, your SaaS applications, maybe your MongoDB or your NoSQL interfaces, or some of those event streams. And then from there, we have Hevo. So what Hevo will do is we'll connect to those sources. We'll go ahead and we'll move that data to your warehouse. That warehouse could be something like Snowflake, it could be Redshift, could be BigQuery. We have a couple different options for destinations. And then from there, you'll go ahead and do all of your transformations, all of your data modeling. Maybe you have a medallion architecture. So you take that bronze layer and you move it to the silver and to the gold. And then you feed that gold application to your gold layer to your applications, right? And that's what your LLMs are sitting on top of. So that's where Hevo fits inside of that stack, is in between your sources and your warehouses. And then you'll go ahead and do the transformations post load. So we've talked a lot about Hevo. Let's actually see what it looks like. So let me go ahead and let me change screens here. And let me jump into Hevo and show you how we build pipelines and what that looks like. So inside of building pipelines in Hevo, we are a SaaS-based application. So you just go ahead and go to hevodata.com and then log in. And from there, you'll be able to create your pipelines. Pipelines are the main object inside of Hevo. That contains everything from your connection to the sources that you're going to go through, as well as the objects. So let's go ahead and create a pipeline. So we will create a pipeline. Here are all the different sources that we have access to. We're always adding to this list. If there's something that is not on this list that you need, let us know. And we'll go ahead and we'll see what it takes to build that connector and add that connector out there. So in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll use some SQL Server connectors. And in this case, I'm going to connect to an RDS SQL Server instance. And then it's going to ask me for my destination. So in this case, I want to go to Snowflake. Now it's asking me, how do I want to know what has changed as I go through and run this sync? So depending on the source that you pick, you'll see different options here because different sources have different ways of tracking that. For example, Postgres has WAL or write ahead logs. SQL Server has the ability to have change data capture or change tracking. So in this case, we can go ahead and we'll just choose CDC or change tracking because I know that the SQL Server I'm connecting to has that set up on it already. So now it's going to ask me for some connectivity information. So we'll go ahead and we'll give it a name. So we'll just call this Demo Days 2. And then we'll give it a database host. So I'll pull over some connection information that I have. So we'll pull over the host information. We'll pull in our login. We will pull in our password. And then the database that we want to connect to on SQL Server. And then the schema name is DBO. Over here on the right side, we give you some information on how to set up CDC. So maybe I don't have change data capture set up. I can figure out how to do that, right? So this will tell me all the privileges I need to grant to those users, IP addresses I need to do, how do I enable change tracking. So depending on the source that you're connecting to, we'll give you some information so that you can see what you need to do in order to connect to it. Additional settings. So if you want to do an SSH tunnel, we can connect through an SSH tunnel. If you want to do reverse SSH, that's an option as well. And then if you want to use your own SSL certificates, we can do that. But data is always encrypted in transformation or in transport as well as at rest with Evo. So we'll go ahead and leave those options off. We'll hit test and continue. It'll go out there and it will try to connect to my source database and it will let me know if that connection is available. So we'll give it a second here. Awesome. It was able to find it. So what it wants to do now is it says, now I need a destination to go to. We'll choose a destination I've created previously. So this is connecting to my Snowflake instance. So I have a warehouse I want to use, my database I want to land it to, my authentication type. So we recommend authenticating through key pair with Snowflake. If you don't know how to set that up, over here on the right side, we walk you through setting up key pair authentication and what that looks like. And so we'll go ahead and hit test and continue using that destination. And we'll go ahead and connect, make sure that it can use that key pair authentication to connect to my Snowflake instance. Next, it's going to ask me to configure my pipeline. So when I start configuring my pipeline, it's asking me what do I want to do. First, I want to give it a name, right? So we'll just call this demo days 2. We'll give it a destination prefix. We'll give it demo days 2. And this is the schema that it will create inside of the database. I told it to inside of Snowflake. So it'll create a new schema called demo days 2. I need to figure out what I want to do with my load. Do I want to merge it, which is typically what you want to do, meaning I want to update existing rows and append new rows. I could choose to just append data. This might be because I'm doing some testing and I want to see what's actually flowing through my pipeline. That's an easy way to do that. But for the most part, it's always merge. We look at the failure handling policy. So by default, we will fail up to 10,000 events. So Hevo does everything in events. So an event is any create, insert, update, or delete to the data. And we can fail up to 10,000 times before we will fail the entire pipeline. This way, if there's only one or two issues, we don't fail a million row pipeline. We only fail the one or two rows that couldn't make it. So by default, we do this up to 10,000. If you want to, we can actually fail that pipeline and we'll let you know. Either way, you will be notified that something has happened if there are any issues. Schema evolution policy, that's what we were talking about before. So I can allow those schema changes to happen dynamically. I can block all changes. So I can actually tell it to fail if I want to, or I can only allow column level changes. So it won't add new tables. It'll only add new columns if columns are changed. We'll go ahead and leave it on allow all changes. Replication type, this is how I want to bring the data over. So in the first sync, do I want to bring in all the historical data, which we're going to do? So I'll just leave it as that. Or do I want to only bring in incremental data? The nice thing about the way that Hevo works, that initial historical sync does not cost you any events. So if you have a row, if you have a table that has a billion records in it, those billion records to move through Hevo the first time will not cost you anything. We will only charge you for the incremental after this pipeline has done that historical sync. I can then choose a scheduled run or I can sync on demand. So we have APIs that you can reach out to and sync that way. Or we can go ahead and schedule it. So I can schedule it to run every 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20. So those are the sync increments that we have at this time. I can also set it up so I can get alerts for my latency. So if my latency exceeds a certain amount of time, so we define latency as the last time data was written to the database. If it's exceeded that certain limit, we can go ahead and send you an email if you want. We'll go ahead and we'll hit save and continue. It's then going to ask me to configure my objects. So it's going to go out to the source system. It's going to see all of the tables I have access to. And then it's going to allow me to choose those tables. So we'll hit select all objects. If I wanted to, I can look into each one of these objects and I can see all of the columns that we're going to automatically sync. So those look good. So we'll just go ahead and bring over everything. We'll hit save and continue. Last screen is just a confirmation. So this is saying, here's your source, here's your destination, here's your pipeline. We're going to merge. We're going to allow up to 10,000 failures. We're going to allow all changes on schema. We're going to schedule it, and it's going to run every 5 minutes. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit save pipeline. So now it's going to go ahead. It'll start initializing my pipeline, and then it will go ahead and start running and syncing. So that's how easy it is to create a pipeline inside of Hevo. Let's jump out and let's look at a pipeline that's already been there. So I have some history just to get you an idea of what that looks like. So with this one, I can see this one's set to run every day, it looks like. I can see inside of each job, I can see all of the tables that were synced. I can see if there were any changes. So it looks like backed orders and dim customers had some new rows. I can see how many were ingested and how many were loaded. And I can see everything that went through. I can look at my session log, so I can get a detailed session log of the connection that went through Hevo. I can always edit my pipeline as well and change any issues there. Up here in the alerts, I can see all of the alerts that are happening. So here's any alerts for any pipelines that I may have. I can also edit these alerts and I can choose how I get them and which which one it goes to. So I have an option of sending it to Slack if I set up that integration, or I can set it up to an email. I can add additional email recipients here. I can add distribution lists here. The nice thing is the way that Hevo works, we do not charge by pipeline. We do not charge by connections. We do not charge by users. All we charge by is those events. And the nice thing is we always let you know what those event counts are. So in that job history that I showed you, it showed you all of the events that we're running through. I can also run out here and I can see my usage summary, and I can download my usage summary by pipeline and see each time that it ran, how it ran, and how many events were in each one of those. The nice thing about going event wise is that we have full transparency on how much data we're actually moving. The other thing I can do here is I can look at my team. I can add additional users to my Hevo interface. I can give those users different permissions. So there's a couple different levels of users that I can give. Once again, we don't charge by users, we just charge by those events. So that's how easy it is to set up a pipeline inside of Hevo. Let's jump over to Snowflake and let's look at the result of that pipeline, right? So here's one of the demo days uh, pipelines that I loaded. Here's all of those tables that I have moved over. The thing that I did here real quick is I created a semantic view. So if you don't know Snowflake, semantic views are how I map my structured data into an agentic model. And then I can use that semantic view to an agent, and then I can run what they call Snowflake intelligence to go ahead and query that data. So this semantic view, I just identify all of the tables that are in there. I identify what are dimensions and what are facts. And then I also identify all the relations through the different tables. So how all the tables relate to one another. Once I have those set up, I can go out here to AI and ML. I can open up Snowflake Intelligence and I can use that agent. So I created that retail demo agent, which uses that semantic layer. And now I can ask it a question. So what are my top 10 stores by sales? And what it's going to do is it's going to go out there and it's going to use that semantic model to change this natural language into a query. So it's going to go out there, it's going to run. So this is the SQL that it generated based on the question that I asked. Once again, it is AI, so we have to make sure that it is doing the right things because it's not always right, but it does pretty well, right? And then it's going to tell me, okay, here are your top 10 stores. Here's the store with the most orders. It's going to generate a bar graph for me just so I have a nice visualization to see what's going on. And just that easily, I've made data available for an AI system to use. I set it up to run every 5 minutes. It's going to go ahead and resync every 5 minutes. It's going to refeed this data, and my end users are going to be able to go ahead and comb through that data in using an AI agent and querying what they need out of it. So that's Hevo. That's how we use it. So I kind of showed you everything. It took me a little while to get through the demo just because I went through everything and explained everything to you. But it really does take just minutes to set up a pipeline inside of Hevo.
Interesting, Dan. Thank you so much for the demo. And just now you just showed us how to, build pipeline for Snowflake in minutes. That's pretty amazing. And we all know about schema drift, API limits, and duplicate records are generally the silent killers in production, right? How does Hevo handle that in the ingestion layer? And has it does it ever reach the models?
Of course. So let's talk about how Hevo is great and what makes Hevo really well, right? So kind of the key things of Hevo, right? We have reliability, observability, and transparency are the things that we focus on. So talking about all of the, maybe my source is down, maybe the website is down, maybe there's an outage in AWS or something like that. I need a system that is reliable and that if it does fail, it will go ahead and continue on and try again. So we have auto retry, we have fault tolerance so that, if we start getting into issues with queuing, we'll go ahead and we'll make sure if events were skipped for one reason or another, we'll make sure that those events move over in the next pipeline. And then we'll go ahead and then we'll deal with that schema evolution, right? Because in that pipeline definition, I told it to go ahead and deal with any evolution that it sees. So that way, if a new column pops up or a data type changes, we go ahead and we just push that on to the destination. So we do not break that pipeline. If we take a look at observability and how we can help you there, in the demo, I showed you those per event logs. So I'm able to see every job and I'm able to see how it ran. I'm able to see how many events it was able to move over. Any issues that happened during the runtime of those events, I would get a real-time alert. So I would go, it would either go to my email or it would go to Slack. However, I've set up that notification to happen. And then, of course, I showed you the job monitor where I can see every job that it's run and I can see how it was run. If there were any issues, I can download each one of those session monitors and see what happens. And then we talk about transparency. So transparency to us means you will not get a surprise bill. You will know exactly what you're being billed for. You will understand those events that are coming through. A lot of our competitors don't do that. What they'll do is they'll kind of group everything together. And by doing that, you don't necessarily notice how often you may be rewriting the same row over and over again. We just did a POC recently where we found out that their loading process actually had some issues because they were rewriting the data, but they didn't know that because the data it was rewriting was exactly the same. But we picked it up because we noticed it as an event change. So they saw a lot more events than they were expecting. So they were able to go in and fix those pipelines. So the nice thing about being event-based is it's very clear and it's concise. Our events are a fraction of like a monthly active rows or anything like that. And also the way that we scale differently. So just because you go from 100,000 events a month to 200,000 events, your bill is not going to double. We do scale differently. We do have different pricing tiers and things like that that we work through as well. So let's talk about a customer that was successful with Hevo and what they did. So Zippy is a Brazilian-based finance company. So what they focus on is they focus on loans to small entrepreneurs who need capital in order to start their business and run their business. So this means that they are constantly pulling from different sources. They are creating credit reports, and they want to make sure that they loan to the right people. With the solution that they had, they were not able to get to all the different sources that they had. They were not seeing the reliability that they needed, and they were not seeing the scalability that they needed. So when they moved to Hevo, we were able to step in there, take over those pipelines. We were then able to load Redshift so that we could go ahead and get them their data in a timely fashion so that their ML and AI models were more up to date, so that when they ran a credit report or when they ran a credit check or viability, they were able to determine if that was a good person to give a loan to or not, right? And actually, they have a study where they were actually able to reduce the amount of defaulted loans because we were able to make their pipelines stronger and better and be able to get the data that they needed to in the time they needed it. So what's next? What are the next steps? Right. So we start looking at what we can do. So the next steps is you can go to hevodata.com and start a free trial. You don't need a credit card. You don't need anything. You just need an email address. And you'll go ahead and create those pipelines. And as I showed you, it's very simple. You just choose source and you choose target, you choose how you want to sync, and you're off to the races. If you want a little bit more information, you want to understand a little bit better costing, maybe you have a unique instance, we can personalize a demo. We can get on a call with you and start a cycle if that makes sense. And then, of course, you'll get all the resources from today's demo and meeting as well, if you need to and wanted to go through those.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan, for walking us through each and every step of the demo and also making sure that we get the end product live as well. Yes, this is the time where we take up all the questions, and we already do have one question in the Q&A tab. So basically, the first question is, how does Hevo offer data unification and integrating across five different sources, data currently in silos, and vision for all sources, data under one roof of unification layer, and then further feeding it to ML and analytics drives?
So there's a lot going on in that question. So let's kind of break it down on what's happening. So the first piece is how do we deal with data unification and integration across? So what we're doing in Hevo is we're connecting to all those disparate sources and we're bringing them to one location. So the point of Hevo is to be that first hop for that initial bronze layer. Any transformation that you do is going to be post load. So I may be dropping those five different data sources into five different databases. And then I may be doing something like DBT, or I might be using dynamic tables in SQL or in Snowflake. There's a couple, or I might be using Python to go ahead and transform those into a cohesive model. So Hevo is getting the data from A to B, and then you would work with the data source or the data provider that you're using, like Snowflake, to go ahead and integrate those. DBT is very common that we see customers use to bring that data together and get it ready for that gold layer to present to those AI sources.
Okay, we have another question which says, how do you position yourself in the toolbox? Who are your competitors?
Sure. So I'm going to assume that DE is data engineering, to make sure that we're talking about the same things here. Who are our competitors? Our competitors are Airbyte, our Fivetran, our Airflow. Well, actually, sorry, OpenFlow
Stitch. Yeah, open.
on that one. So our competitors are those strict ETLs. So we have Matillions in there. Informatica is in this space as well. The difference is that we are more based on that modern architecture, which is much more of an ELT process. So we're going to extract, load, and then transform post load.
Okay, amazing. We're just going to give one more minute to see if there are any more questions that would come in. And if not, we'll close the demo day for today and we'll make sure that all the recordings and resources come to your inbox. We'll also, if you guys want to know more, please feel free to go to our homepage and see what we do, what all companies we've been doing it for since past few years. I believe we do not have any more questions. So Dan, thank you so much for joining in today and walking us through the demo. Thank you everybody who stayed towards the end. And just keep an eye out on your inbox for all the resources. Thank you.